What is up, my mixed martial arts family? Coach Sky here, and I am joined today by my personal jiu-jitsu coach, Harrison Pfeiffer. Welcome to another episode of Under the Cage podcast, the podcast where we go into the nuts and bolts of the mixed martial arts world. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and let Coach Harrison here introduce himself. Coach, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
So first off, let's just do kind of a little intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where your mixed martial arts journey started, where your martial arts stuff started, and go from there.
Yeah, I kind of grew up in a rough part of the Florida and had to learn how to defend myself. So I started with karate under Yoichi Kozuma and did that for about 3 years. And that started my journey. And then in research came across Bruce Lee and learned about mixing martial arts together. And I started, after I got my black belt in karate, I started taking Aikido. Did that for 5 or 6 years. And then after I did Aikido, I got into catch wrestling in Fort Myers. And from catch wrestling, jiu-jitsu started getting real popular. And I didn't have a bottom game, so I started trying to figure out how to do jiu-jitsu. Came back to Tallahassee. There was no martial arts at all, other than the norm, taekwondo and whatever.
What year was this going on?
It was 52. It was 94, 95.
Okay, true ancient history then.
Yeah. And after that, like I said, I came to town and just was really doing nothing and was kind of giving up on training because there just wasn't a scene in town. And I ran into an old friend of mine who happened to be a blue belt under Hoist Gracie, Cassiner Shulak. We all call him KC. We did it was just like a happenstance meeting, as it always happens in Tallahassee.
Right.
And he's like, "Man, I really wish we could train." I was like, "Me too." And he goes, "Well, if I found a spot, would you be wanting to train?" I was like, "Find the spot. We'll do it tomorrow." And then it was just me and I'm blanking on the other guy's name. It was just the three of us for, maybe it was a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden word got out that we were training, Fight Club kind of stuff. And
where were you guys at this point? Because I know when I showed up to this whole thing, you guys had a spot, but they were always talking about there was a place before the place I found you.
Well, we were in this third person's backyard for not like a couple of days. We just started, we were rolling around the dirt, and then Casey was like, "I got us a spot," and then that was Tharp Street.
Okay.
And we had maybe 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, and then people just all of a sudden started showing up. I think we were maybe, a few months deep when you showed up. Okay. With Odom and all those guys.
How do you think the word started getting out? I mean, I know I found you guys because some friends of mine watching UFC, and I think we heard about you while we were at the FSU Combatives room, which was in some little basement thing underneath the Leech, and they heard about you from somewhere, but that was kind of third, fourth person. How do you guys think it was getting around at that point?
I guess with the, referencing Fight Club is when you tell people no one to, keep it a secret, it just spreads. Because we literally, no advertising, nothing. I think maybe we cut flyers once, but nobody handed them out. You know what I mean? It was literally word of mouth is how it caught on. I remember after like a week or two, like I said, I went to unlock the key, and the parking lot was literally full of cars,
right.
And I was like, this big giant guy comes in and he's like, "Is this where the Fight Club is?" And I was like, maybe.
I guess that's what we're calling ourselves.
Right. You know how to fight?
Yeah.
No. I go, then this is it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing I did remember about that place is like no one exactly knew how to fight. You know, I know everyone had pieces of the information, but
Right.
none of us had the whole
Not even
picture at
close.
that
Yeah,
time.
not
You
even
know,
close.
like KC knew a little bit of jujitsu. You knew the Aikido stuff, and there was the older guy who I feel like there was an older purple belt floating around at one point or another.
Yeah, that was Harlan.
Harlan?
Yeah, and we
Okay.
brought him in from South Florida.
Okay.
And he still is actually. He's still highly active in associated with Harlan Taylor. I think he's in. I think he owns Port St. Lucie Gracie. I think it is now. Like second degree black belt under hoist, something like that. He came. I brought him up 2 or 3 times for seminars, and that was how we kind of learned. We started learning technique.
Right. Yeah.
And then right after that, we were rolling one day, and this lady came in and was like, where's such and such, and we're like, I have no idea. And he goes, well, he hasn't paid me for 6 months.
Oh yeah, yeah. The landlady.
Right.
Yeah, there's no rent getting paid up in here.
And we're like, so what does that mean? And she goes, well, unless you want to pay me $800 a month, you got to get out of here. And I was like, okay. And then Brian Orkin, who was in the club there with us for a while, he decided, he just basically said, that, hey, if I found a spot, would you be willing to make sure the doors were open? And I was like, that's all I'm doing here.
Right.
And then that was when we moved to Basin Street. And that was when we started trying to get a little more legit, because we started sending people to fight places. We were doing the fight party in Atlanta and a couple other places. I'm not kind of blanking on the names, but
yeah. When exactly did the actual competition stuff start? Because I don't remember. Was anyone actually fighting at the original spot, that judo school where we first started out?
just Odom.
And he was. Where did Odom come from?
He had actually came from Frank Shamrock, and that was how we had an associated. Or the Team MMA actually it was associated with Frank through Odom.
Yeah, but when Odom was there from the get go, so where did he come in? Did you know him beforehand? Or
no, he was one of the guys that walked up when there was a parking lot full of cars. Yeah. And then he's like, hey, I've trained with Frank Shamrock a couple of times and blah, blah, blah. We're like, well, you'll fit in great with us.
Right the hell on it.
Yeah. And so, but he didn't really want to teach at all. He just wanted to beat us up, which, at that point we were all good with that. And, still young enough to heal, as they say.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, Orkin was like, yeah, if I pay the rent, will you keep the doors open? I was like, yeah, fine. That's all I'm doing here. And that's when we moved to Basin Street into that Kung Fu school. And we were there. Well, we were at Tharp Street for about 2 years. And then we were Basin for 2 years ish, something like that.
Was it 2 years?
Maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, I was around by then. So,
I met you at Tharp Street.
Yeah,
and but that was pure Fight Club, and then we started trying to teach because we were sending fighters to these fights in random areas, and we were like, well, we're putting Tallahassee Fight Club T-shirts on their back. If they're representing us, then maybe we ought to teach them something.
Yeah,
so they're not just going out there getting beat up. And so then we started trying to teach, and that just kind of got thrown in my lap because I was also the guy that opened the door.
Yeah. That was a crazy thing about things back then is being a situation like that, you could still occasionally win some fights. Nowadays you have schools kind of like what we're talking about here where no one really knows the ins and outs. And they put out fighters, and they're just meat. We use them as warm-up fighters for our real students. But these back then, it was such a different landscape that just a guy who was tough could go on a decent. He could get a pro career if he was tough enough. He probably wasn't going to make it to the UFC, but you could do all right back then. And it's not that way anymore.
Yeah, there were several guys that came through where I was like, yeah, if this guy wants to go all the way, he probably can, because he was tough, or he had solid wrestling or solid base and something that was, either he was tough enough and skilled enough to hang. I've always, sometimes I've like when I've trained with guys, I've that I've always been kind of like surprised sometimes and how good they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. We definitely had a few guys. Even once or twice, I've met people from the early days of the UFC that I've trained with. That it's just, if I'm tapping you out, how the hell were you in the UFC? And it's just that's where things were at that time,
right, right.
know?
Yeah, now it's such a high level.
Oh God, the undercard guys will kill 99.9% of the human population.
Definitely what we were doing back then.
Yeah. Oh God.
But we did all right, considering.
Yeah.
We were a known entity in the area, and then we got into a bit of a situation with the kung fu school, mainly because we were taking their students. We'd kind of proven that their kung fu didn't really work.
Yeah. I liked that guy too. He was a really nice dude.
Yeah, no, I actually still, I'm still in contact with him. I love him to death.
And Les could fight too.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of his students, not as much, but Les, he was open to the other stuff.
100%, 100%. I take nothing from anything that was going on there. Just that jiu-jitsu and the freedom of MMA, as far as like a system, means that you can, at least back then, you could pick it up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And you could have good, just basic fighting skills pretty quickly. That where kung fu takes a pretty long time to develop skills in, because they're essentially trying to rewrite everything you do movement wise.
Yeah.
Everything is done a very specific way, where like, no, just throw it as hard as you can. This is a kick, throw it as hard as you can. And so the learning curve's a little faster.
Proof's kind of in the pudding on
and we sparred a lot more.
Yeah, and there was definitely more of a sink or swim vibe. I mean, we really only know how that was around here. I don't know if it was different in bigger cities, but man, it was just welcome. Do you know anything? No. Well, there's the mats. Good luck. And
put on these gloves.
Yeah. Fight till someone falls down, and the last few guys might take a fight, we
weren't in any way like trying to get students, and we weren't trying to pick up people. People came in the door, we beat them up, or they beat us up. That happened too sometimes. And it was, if they came back, we charged them $50 a month.
Yeah.
And if they didn't show up, then they probably told somebody how they got the black eye, and then the other person came in.
Yeah. We moved. The kung fu school, felt bad for him, but I remember we moved over to TMMA, and that seemed to be when things sort of started to transition into an actual MMA scene and an MMA school in Tallahassee.
That was when we were like, we were honestly trying to create a school. That was the first time we were actually trying to attract, more hobbyist type
Where would
people.
this be? This would probably be around what, 05, 06, somewhere in there?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
That feels right.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe, I think 05.
Yeah. But I did notice,
and the fight club was on Third Street. I think it was 03. So maybe it was just a couple years that we were in transition there.
Yeah.
02. Well, 02, 03. Yeah.
It's hard to remember. It's a lot of head trauma.
A lot of head trauma. A lot of other kinds of trauma.
Yeah. Self-inflicted. Well, so around the time that TMMA happened, Tallahassee MMA, that also seemed to be when a lot of the sort of dramas and things started to kick off. That I don't know if it was that people suddenly there was a school, and for some reason that seemed to bring out the egos more, or what it was, but just I don't know. It kind of to me always felt like that was when a lot of the trouble started. And
Yeah, well, because we were just a club, I think, in the beginning, and everybody was fighting everybody. So there wasn't any essential hierarchy or anything like that. And then when we started doing the school, we were giving out ranking shirts and still sparring all the time. But then people would inevitably get ranked above somebody that could beat them up. And then there was the hierarchy got all kind of mixed and crazy. And we also were doing a lot more events. So then there was people that would get a couple fights, and all of a sudden they were ready for the UFC and wouldn't listen to anything you had to say or anything like that.
The events were crazy back then too. They are not what they were today. I mean, you still come across some crazy ratchet events, but nothing like those were the norm back then. Like they would pull guys out of the crowd,
Oh yeah,
get in there, it's just
one of Bagamoni, his first fight in Iowa, which is around that time, like 06, 07. It was literally his first fight was literally in a strip club, and the guy he fought came wearing jeans and was smoking a cigarette all the way up to the cage.
nice.
Camped out the cigarette. Jumped in there.
I think I might win this one. I feel it good.
Yeah. Feeling like my cardio is better than his. Yeah.
Duck a couple punches and this turns into an exhibition. Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing over in Jacksonville. It was an abandoned strip club when I did there, and it just seemed a lot more things where you'd show up at like a rodeo location and you're warming up in a horse stall,
right? And chickens running around.
Yeah, literally. And
oh yeah, no.
It's been such a shift in tone, but so I guess that the thing I can think of on this is that like back at the club field when we were on Basin Street, everything was sort of unified. It was all in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And after TMMA, first Brian kind of got into it with Shane, and then Shane went and did his own thing. And I wasn't really privy enough at the inner workings of things at the time. I wasn't really part of management, but Saman was starting to do pretty well, and somehow that ended up with him and that guy Berthoff over somewhere else, and that was where things started to split. What did you guys notice? How was that going down from the management point of view? Because again, I only saw it from the fighter point of view.
Right. Well, that's just it. I wasn't really doing anything management wise. I was just trying to make sure the classes were being taught. That was kind of my part of it, was bring people in, try to sell them on what we're doing, and then making sure that somebody was teaching the classes that we were advertising.
Mm.
And sometimes it was just me. And then, we'd throw other people in, like yourself, we'd, anybody that had some skill, we would like, hey, you know how to throw a jab.
Yeah.
Why don't you teach the class on jabs? And that was just, and I think that because attention was being spent in other directions, and people were getting promised, other things, because part of being a fighter is also kind of the glamour of it. I'm a cage fighter, blah, blah, blah. And that when people think that they can, tie their boat to your anchor, especially if they see dollar signs through it somehow, which I've yet to see.
Yeah. Dollar signs were not there at that time.
Then all of a sudden people start, making promises and breaking promises and making offers and whatever. We lost a lot of people just to people making promises that, that either they kept or not, I don't know, but a lot of promises that, created stuff that never amounted to anything.
Yeah. Other schools,
right. And I took over the gym from Orkin. That was, I would say, 07. something like that.
That was that long ago.
And I was only as sole owner, I was only open for about 6 months. And then I found out that my son was autistic, and I was basically given the choice where, I could keep doing the gym, but I don't, then I have to pay for health insurance and all these things that my wife got for free.
Yeah.
And I was like, somebody's got to stay home and figure this out. So I designated myself to do that. Plus there were other gyms, and so there were people that I could go, hey, you want to train here, go over there with these guys. And so I didn't feel like I was leaving anybody in the lurch by bailing.
Yeah. So at that point, because I do remember there was kind of like after Brian left, there was a lot of time where just you'd get there and no one was there to teach a class, or like Dan Funes was supposed to teach, and he'd just go in the back and play on the computer as the numbers dipped. So after TMMA shut down, then there was C4.
Mm-hmm.
You did come over and coach at C4 for a while.
Yeah, I was teaching
after TMMA went
down.
down.
I think it was once a week or twice a week over there. And the scene over there was similar, but it was also different. It was very Saman focused.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't that Saman focused, I guess, and then Shane offered me a spot, coaching with him, and I figured that, it was closer to my house. And
Shane Winiski Martial Arts.
Yeah.
Still in town, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's got a pretty nice little spot in Clark now, actually.
Yeah, he's not in there. He's really he stayed with it. So good for him. But well, so let's think we've kind of brushed in about 22 minutes over almost 20 years of period here. What would you think of as like those crazy freaking stories from this period? What would you think of as one of those standout, like, holy hell, that was insane? It would be different from something in Los Angeles or Vegas or places that were more mainstream MMA, just because of where we are. And
Funes took a crew one time out to Alabama, and when he found the spot, they were literally setting up a ring of cars.
Nice. Blood sport style. Yeah.
They were literally setting up a ring of cars. And after asking them if there was going to be like a paramedic or doctor or something, in the area, and was told that that Bubba had a first aid kit in the truck or something. He was just like, yeah, okay, we got to get our gear in the car. And then they just went in the car and left.
Nice. They didn't even fight for that one.
Yeah, they're like, no. It just seems a little too dangerous. And also a situation where, like, maybe you get shot if you won.
Yeah, one of those things, if somebody put the wrong money on the wrong person and you knock them out, yeah, you could get in trouble. I could see that.
Dan was completely flipped out about it. I think he even called me to tell me that was the case, and I was like, we're not fighting. And
would have been a story.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, may not have ended well.
Yeah, as long as one of them got out of there.
As long as somebody got out to tell the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was. I mean, we had gym wars where people went through walls.
I do remember that Odom and Casey. Yeah.
Well, Casey did say, literally walked in the gym and then just told Odom, I don't think you can knock me out.
Yeah.
So Odom was like, well, gear up. Let's find out. To his, he did not knock him out.
No, just knocked him ththrough a wall into the other unit next to us. They were good sports about that over there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I remember I actually bought my t-shirts from them. And he literally pointed at like 3 dents in the wall. And I was like, who did that? Who did that? What about this one? And I was like, well, hey, I'm not going to pay to fix them.
Yeah.
I'll pay for the t-shirts. And you're lucky I'm paying for those because
Yeah. We broke.
we broke.
Yeah. And going back a little bit to the things getting Saman oriented, that was kind of a weird period too that you saw here as a transition. It was the first time, this scene had been building for all this time, and suddenly one of them managed to actually start getting to those next levels. But as you said, so like Josh Saman, great guy, RIP.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
Yeah. But it did sort of, as he started getting close to the UFC and he made it to the Ultimate Fighter and got signed, and that the whole scene did become sort of this Josh's training partners, and everything kind of became second fiddle to that. And as you said, C4 was the Josh show. It was all kind of based around him. So that actually, I would say, is one of the things that kind of killed C4,
for sure.
Yeah, because when Josh started he was in the UFC now, he didn't have time. He needed real training partners. He couldn't have a guy who knew a little bit of this and a guy who knew a little bit of that. He needed UFC caliber fighters. So when he left, the management kind of got left to, Eric Johnson, which Eric did the best he could, but it wasn't really what he'd been paid to do there at that time. So.
Yeah. And then not only that, but then, there's not enough money to make it worth your while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That if you're lucky, you're covering rent and electricity and, maybe you can eat a little bit, but, I never made anything much more than that.
Yeah.
And we had at Team MMA, we had a pretty decent roster a couple times, where we're in the, 60, 75 student range.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I know C4, was probably at best, they're probably around the same.
Pretty close.
The biggest problem we had was that it was just really hard to keep civilians involved. Because it was still rough. We were still sparring and rolling hard, and not everybody even knew what they were doing. They were just rolling hard, so people were getting hurt unnecessarily with mistakes, and people were coming in with ringworm and staph infections. And
I would say that public perception has also evolved a lot over time that made running a gym a lot easier. Because back then, like, the public perception of MMA was a bunch of
it was Brad Pitt movie.
Yeah, it was just
you heard Fight Club
smashing each other. Yeah,
that was what you thought. That we were making soap and being terrorists or whatever. And
our image that we presented didn't help with that either.
No, it did not.
People. A woman comes in with her teenage son, and there's
that was part of the glamour
guys,
of it.
Mauling each other.
That was part of the glamour of it, was that we were, big tough guys, and we were beating each other up and being manly and whatever. Which is
it followed over to C4 too, and honestly, as much as I hate to say it, when C4 closed and I opened Train Fight Win here, that was something that Alyssa and I talked about, was just that image. Like, we can't have that if we want the more casual people to pay the bills so that we can train the upper level fighters. Like, just the simple act of telling people, put your damn shirt on, was that was mind blowing to everybody. What do you mean, put the shirt on? It's hot in here. No, we actually have AC now, right. So changing that viewpoint of everybody in the area to come and walk in the door and not be intimidated and not be scared. But then on top of that, I sort of feel like the sport itself became more widely accepted,
Well, it actually became a sport. I think that was the big difference, is that then you actually had true competitors looking to participate in the sport, not just fighting tough guys or, wrestlers that were looking for a challenge outside of, their wrestling career. It actually became a sport. People were actually making some money. So it wasn't just, there were still fighters involved, but a lot of the guys that were coming up were actually just athletes, George St. Pierre and the guys that weren't actually street fighters, that would never have even thought of being in a street fight. They were looking at it as just a physical challenge and not, not actually fighting.
Yeah. And it sort of brought that more respectable perception with it.
Right. And then also
Conor
the fact
McGregor
that
threw us all back 10 years.
right. Well, then, so the people watch it, then they're, they plenty of people sort of think, oh, well, I can do that. And then, I was a, great wrestler in high school, and all of a sudden it starts to pick up from there.
Yeah.
And, one of the craziest thing that always happened with Team MMA was just a lot of people popping in thinking that they were going to be the next whatever,
Yo.
and
This guy.
yeah, I had 150 street fights. I won them all. And I was like, well,
great. Now we got to unteach you a bunch of stupid crap. Yeah.
Right. And and you pick the smallest guy in the room, and
yeah,
yeah,
let their ego die. There were a lot of crazies then too. I mean, I still get the crazies coming in, but I kind of dissuade them now.
Well, they're easier to spot.
Yeah. You couldn't tell the crazies from the actual fighters back then.
Yeah, because everybody in the room's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Just the guy who's actually like crazy. But yeah, no, it was, we had people coming in to challenge us back in the day. Gerald,
lunatic,
came in and tried to challenge us with a bunch of his crew. And then when he found out that we were actually down to do it, he
ran,
lost interest.
Yeah.
I take nothing away from his double windmill kick that he used in the Battle of Atlanta, but
an hot poo,
right? And probably longer than that.
Yeah. That was a mess. No, and I think about even that more professional demeanor that the scene has developed over the years here in Tallahassee has actually made the fight team a lot more of a professional thing too. I mean, fighters are always going to be crazy, but that's kind of one thing that, again, I've really fostered here is that environment and community and sort of thing. And when you get those crazies in here, the toxic ones, the aggressive ones, the ones that are wanting to show everyone in the room that they're the tougher than you, and I'm going to hurt you to show you how good I am and all that. And, that stuff, I see that starts on the mats. Those people, those toxic personalities work their way over to the fight team. And, they were never curtailed back in the day because no one really knew to curtail them around here.
Right. Not only that, but also you needed the sparring, you needed the guy, you needed the body. And that was part of the thing was that, when you only got 5 guys to train with, you need all 5 of those guys. If one of them happens to be a loony, that was just part of it.
Yeah.
The biggest problem we had with that too was that the guys would train for their fight, and want all these accommodations from the team for their prep for the fight, and then when someone else had a fight, you could never find
yeah.
them. And there was a sense of team, but it wasn't a sense of family. It was a sense of like, you have to be here. I was here for you. Now you need to be here for me. Kind of a sense of responsibility. And that's one of the big things I've seen that you fostered here really successfully, is that everyone has a sense of family and a sense of responsibility to everyone else that's on the team.
Yeah. And we beat our head into that wall in the early days too of, because we carried that early Tallahassee MMA scene in here with us.
Sure.
We came from C4 when they closed down. Most of their student base came here, so that was something we had to kind of work at over the years, and it led to a lot of bad stuff. But I think one of the nice things about it is, being as I've been able to travel, I've been able to see other gyms and things like that, and get the looks of how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just see the things that we did wrong in the early days to try and avoid it, because there were a lot of things we did wrong back then.
Oh man, I would say all of them.
Yeah, pretty much.
If there was something to do wrong, we at least tried it at least once.
Yeah, always too many people in charge.
Maybe even repeatedly.
Yeah, too many people in charge of the place. Not enough money to properly promote it and maintain it. Things like that. Because they repeat it again and again and again in all these schools. They're sort of always the same thing that took us out at the ankles.
Yep. That's it. Well, I mean, to run a successful school, you either need, multiple people to cover things, or you need to be a single person that can do it all.
Yeah.
And it's rare that you can find anybody like that anymore that, is going to solely dedicate their entire life to their school and run it by themselves. In fact, I can only think of Shane that's able to pull that off.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much going to cover us. We are at the later part of the mark. So, first of all, thank you very much for sitting down and doing this.
Appreciate the opportunity and the many years of training, my friend.
Yeah. And thank you for continuing to teach jiu-jitsu here at my school. All right. So that is our show. We will be back in 2 weeks. And we look forward to seeing everyone then. We will have an interview with Professor Felipe Nito here in Tallahassee as well. And then we will be headed down to Orlando after that to get some interviews with some of the larger schools down there and some of the people that train there. So we will see everyone then. And thanks for joining us. Plus.